This story is about alien students who laugh at Earth's predators until an anaconda escapes and does the unthinkable. What follows is chaos, revelation, and a twist that changes everything they thought they knew. Tyler Monroe always thought he had a strong stomach. He'd been a paramedic before turning to teaching biology, and there wasn't much that could faze him. Not blood, not the deep bruises of a rollover car crash, not even the jagged silence of someone taking their last breath in a Walmart parking lot. But there was something about leading a group of 12-foot-tall, scale-skinned alien teenagers through the Denver Zoological Gardens on a hot spring afternoon that made his spine itch like nothing else. "Please stay behind the railings," he called out, jogging to catch up with a towering teal student who had tried to reach over a railing to poke a lounging lion with what looked like a retractable forked tongue. "This isn't a hologram safari. These things are real." The student, who called himself Zemeth, though it sounded more like someone trying to clear their throat underwater, snorted. "Real? These mammalian predators are sluggish. Their musculature is ill-suited for dynamic pursuit. That one's heart rate hasn't increased since we arrived." "Right," Tyler said through clenched teeth. "It's napping. That's what lions do. They nap and then kill something very big very fast." A chorus of hissing chuckles erupted behind him. The aliens, students from a cultural exchange program called Horizon Bridge, had come from a dozen different planets, each with a physiology and attitude more flamboyant than the last. Earth was just a primitive backwater to them. The field trip was meant to bridge understanding. It was not going well. Tyler pressed his walkie. "Maggie, can you meet us at the Reptile Discovery Center? I want to steer these kids away from the carnivores before one of them hops the fence." "Copy that," Maggie's voice crackled. "Meet you by the main enclosure." The group drifted along the paved path, past enclosures lined with laminated fact sheets and bored school kids on unrelated trips. The aliens read none of the signs. Instead, they crowded together, pointing their gangly fingers at hyenas and tigers, laughing in their native frequencies, a warbling that vibrated the bones. "You find this funny?" Tyler asked, stopping in front of the cheetah enclosure. "Your planet's apex predators are a misnomer," said Clemen, a lime-green youth with too many knees. "On Ulkar 9, our equivalent predators phase through solid matter and liquefy prey with sonic vibrations. These quadrupeds, though aesthetically robust, are unimpressive. They also don't need to liquefy anything," Tyler muttered. "They just break spines." Jemet raised a ridged brow. "And yet you place them in cages?" Tyler rubbed the bridge of his nose. "We do that for your safety." Jemet's pupils narrowed to slits. "Unlikely." They rounded the corner to the Reptile Discovery Center, a low building with cool air conditioning and an odor of musk and bleach. Maggie was already waiting, arms crossed. She was shorter than Tyler, but carried herself like a tank, and most of the aliens stepped back instinctively when she leveled her gaze at them. "Let's not touch anything today," she said. "These animals are smarter than you think." The room inside was dimly lit, glass tanks lining the walls containing everything from dart frogs to rattlesnakes. Tyler led the group toward the larger enclosures at the back, where the Anaconda tank stood in all its coiled glory. The snake was named Matilda, 30 feet long, thick as a man's torso, and notoriously antisocial. "She's our big girl," Maggie said proudly. "Anaconda, native to South America, apex predator in its own right." The aliens crowded the glass. Zehemet leaned so close his breath fogged up the pain. "This one lacks venom. It constricts. Slow. Inefficient." "She's not slow," Maggie replied. "She senses vibration, temperature. She's pure muscle. She doesn't chase, she waits." More laughter, this time with mock dramatics. "It waits? That is the extent of its hunting?" "You want to test her?" Tyler said, but quietly. They moved on, shuffling through exhibits. At some point, a low hum began to permeate the air, barely audible, like a TV left on in the next room. Tyler noticed it but shrugged it off. Maybe one of the displays had a faulty speaker. 15 minutes later, all hell broke loose. It started with a crash, shattering glass, followed by a terrified shout from one of the zoo employees. Tyler spun around just in time to see people bolting from the reptile wing, yelling incoherently. Then he saw it. Matilda. The anaconda was out. Not just slithering, but moving with purpose. Her body rippled across the polished floor like liquid muscle, staff stumbling backward as they tried to get out of her way. Panic rose like steam. "Stay back," Maggie barked. "Get the students out of here, Tyler. Now." Tyler corralled the aliens with wide arms, trying to herd them back toward the exit. "Everyone move, now. Don't run, don't scream." Too late. One of the students, Sail, a slender violet creature with translucent skin, bolted in the opposite direction, slipping in the chaos. Tyler reached out, missed, and then Matilda was there. The snake lunged forward and coiled, but not like a predator striking. She wrapped around Sail gently, shielding him with loops of muscle as she hissed low and deep. Then she reared her head and looked into the shadows between two tanks. Tyler froze. Maggie shouted into her radio. Zoo staff scrambled to surround the area, but Matilda remained focused, completely still, as if guarding something from something else. A flicker passed through the air near the back wall. Something shimmered, then blinked out. Jemet stared in horrified silence. "That was not one of us." "What the hell was that?" Maggie asked. The question hung heavy in the air. Matilda slowly uncoiled from around the trembling Sail, who collapsed onto the floor breathing hard. His alien skin was pallid, his limbs twitching. "The thing wasn't in the manifest," said Clement, looking shaken. "It arrived with us, but it was not of us." Tyler crouched beside the snake, staring into her black, lidless eyes. "She didn't escape. She was hunting." Maggie's jaw clenched. "You're telling me the snake broke out to protect someone?" She sensed something. Something wrong. Tyler looked back at the others. "You've been mocking our apex predators all day." Jemet's scales had lost their luster. "We were unaware of such perceptive acuity." Tyler sighed, standing up slowly. "Welcome to Earth." The zoo's emergency lockdown had turned the place into a maze of steel gates and flashing strobes. Staff in yellow vests scurried between control stations, while an incident response team from City Wildlife Services arrived with equipment that looked wildly insufficient against a 30-foot snake, let alone whatever invisible thing had shimmered and vanished behind the tanks. Tyler stayed crouched next to Sael, whose breathing was still shallow. The alien's chitinous ribs rose and fell unevenly under a protective dermal layer that had partially receded, exposing pulsing tissue underneath. It wasn't blood he was losing, but something equally vital, judging by the other students' worried glances. He's not built for stress responses like this," Clement murmured, checking Sail's vitals with a flexible device that wrapped around his wrist and flickered blue. "Whatever the serpent saved him from, it nearly killed him through exposure alone." Tyler looked to Maggie, who was talking urgently with zoo staff. "You said Matilda was antisocial." "She is," Maggie said without turning. "Won't eat with the lights on. Hates her water changed. Never responds to enrichment toys. Barely tolerates handlers. And she broke out of a reinforced enclosure, slid through a public space full of noise and people, and didn't attack anything." "Correct," she said flatly. "Then we have a problem." Back in the staff briefing room, which had been converted into a decontamination area with hurriedly assembled tents and portable medical kits, the surviving alien students sat clustered together. Sail lay on a heat mat, now unconscious but stable. Tyler rubbed his jaw as a veterinary tech checked over Matilda, who was docile as a lapdog and completely uninjured. "She moved with intent," the tech said, shaking his head. "Snakes don't do that. Not like that." "She did it to protect someone," Tyler said. "She sensed something the rest of us couldn't." Clayman, still seated near Sail, looked up. "We brought no unknown organisms in our delegation manifest. Each student was scanned at point of origin and on arrival." "Unless it didn't arrive as a student," Maggie said, arms crossed. Jemet stood stiffly, arms held behind his back in the posture his species used when unsettled. "We brought no parasites. We do not harbor hitchhikers." "You said that thing wasn't one of you," Tyler reminded him. Jemet hesitated. "It matched no known physiology in the Charter's xenobiological database." "Then what the hell was it doing here, and why did a reptile detect it before any of you?" The question cracked open a silence that hadn't yet settled. Tyler stepped out of the tent for air. The sky was still bright, the sun lazy in the afternoon, completely unbothered by anything that had transpired. "Something tells me this wasn't a coincidence," he muttered. He didn't have long to think. A call came from the northeast wing of the zoo. A bird exhibit had been found empty. Not attacked, not damaged, just empty. Staff swore the animals had been there that morning. By late afternoon, 2 more enclosures were discovered, cleared out. No signs of forced entry, no obvious predators. But the animals, mostly small mammals, were gone. Tyler and Maggie stood outside the aviary with Clemen and Zamet, who scanned the area with handheld bioimagers they'd retrieved from their shuttle. "Trace readings suggest subharmonic field oscillations," Clemen said, "but it's faint, weak resonance." "Meaning?" Maggie asked. "Something passed through here, displacing bioelectric patterns but leaving minimal mass disturbance." Jemet glanced around, unease apparent even across his alien expression. "This is not an invasive species. It is an infiltrator." Tyler looked sharply at him. "You think it's intelligent?" "It's behaving with adapted discretion. It avoided large threats, targeted unguarded prey, avoided sensors." Zemet's throat vibrated in a low frequency that Tyler was starting to associate with dread. The team reconvened in the main security hub of the zoo, with live feeds from over 200 cameras. Maggie ordered staff to rewind footage from the last 6 hours. "Stop," Tyler said, pointing to one screen. "There. That shift in shadows, top right, roll back 10 seconds. The tech did, isolating the corner of a service tunnel behind the reptile wing. There it was again. A flicker. Barely a blink of light. Like heat haze bending air, but in the dark, underground. Whatever it was, it moved with disturbing precision. Matilda had gone straight for that area before coiling around sail. "I think our girl's still on patrol," Maggie said, turning to the camera feed from her enclosure. The enclosure was empty. Matilda had escaped again, only this time there were no alarms, no shattered glass. She'd left through the drainage sluice, a route nobody considered a threat vector except, apparently, her. "We're going after her," Tyler said immediately. "You're not trained for containment," Zamet said. "I don't need to be," Tyler said. "I know this zoo, and she's not trying to get out, she's tracking." They formed a reluctant team, Tyler, Maggie, Zamet, and Clemen, moving through the utility tunnels that wound under the zoo's outer perimeter. They found damp tracks, wide and unmistakable, winding through the condensation-slick corridors. Every 50 yards or so, a faint scraping along the wall. At one point, they came across a stack of cleaning supplies that had been shoved aside. "She went this way," Tyler said, brushing a smear of green sludge off a control panel. "She's pushing deeper." Kleiman raised his scanner. "There is a growing resonance spike ahead. Something is fluctuating." Then came the sound, a sharp, skittering rasp like claws on aluminum. Something was ahead, moving fast. Tyler froze. Maggie unholstered her tranquilizer pistol, already set for large game. "Ready?" "Always," Tyler said, voice tight. They turned the next corner and saw Matilda again. She was coiled across the width of the corridor, muscles tense. She had something cornered. It wasn't visible at first, just a strange warping in the air, like oil on water. Then, with a pulse of distortion, it revealed itself. Tyler's brain didn't quite accept what he was seeing. It was quadrupedal, but wrong. Angular, skinless, all tendon and sinew, its head a mass of twitching sensory stalks. It hissed not a sound, but a vibration that rattled Tyler's chest. Jemet cursed in his own language. "It's a Harkali rift beast. Those are extinct. They were hunted to death 1,000 years ago. Guess it missed the memo, Maggie muttered, aiming her weapon. The thing lunged. Matilda struck first. Her body uncoiled with devastating speed, wrapping around the creature mid-leap. The impact threw her against the wall, but she held tight. The beast thrashed violently, shrieking in that mind-piercing frequency. Clayman stumbled backward, bleeding from his ears. Tyler grabbed him and dragged him to the wall. Maggie fired, hitting the thing in a hind leg, but it didn't slow down. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the creature stopped thrashing. Matilda tightened. Bones popped, something gave way with a wet crack, and the beast sagged, motionless. Everyone was silent. Tyler approached slowly. The creature twitched once, then went still. Matilda slithered back a few feet, coiling loosely beside the wall, breathing heavy and labored. "She's injured," Maggie said, kneeling beside the snake. "She took a hit to the flank." Tyler pressed his hand gently to her side. The muscles flexed under his palm, but she didn't resist. He could feel the shallow, pained rhythm of her breath. Her scales were darker, slicked with some of the rift beast's fluid. "He needs surgery," Maggie said, "now." Tyler looked up at Zemet. "Still think our predators are unimpressive?" Zemet didn't answer. He just stared at Matilda, awe and fear mingling across his alien features. "Let's get her home," Tyler said quietly. Surgery on a 30-foot anaconda was not a quiet affair. Matilda was moved to the zoo's veterinary center under heavy sedation, flanked by staff who couldn't decide whether they were more amazed or terrified. The zoo's lead vet, Dr. Carson, called in 2 reptile specialists from the Denver Aquarium and an orthopedic consultant from the university's exotic animal department. She'd suffered internal bruising, several cracked ribs, and lacerations along her ventral side, likely from the rift beast's claws. Tyler stayed the entire night, helping the medical team where he could, occasionally checking on the alien students huddled in the adjoining conference room. They hadn't left either. Zemet hadn't spoken in hours. He stood by the glass, watching the procedure with an unreadable expression. Tyler finally broke the silence. "She'll need weeks of recovery. Her breathing's shallow from fluid buildup. She might not eat for a while." Zemet turned his head slightly. "She intervened for no biological gain." "She protected someone," Tyler said. "That's all the gain she needed." Sale was still unconscious, but improving. The invasive frequencies emitted by the rift beast had overloaded his nervous system, something not entirely unlike a human seizure, but with far deeper reach. Clement had worked tirelessly to stabilize him, with Maggie coordinating supplies and emergency xenomedical equipment from the Horizon Bridge delegation shuttle still parked at the Colorado Air and Spaceport. Tyler helped Maggie lift another med crate when a low pulse reverberated through the walls, barely noticeable, like a distant thunder roar. "That's the 3rd one today," Maggie said. "You think there are more?" Tyler wiped his forehead. "I think that thing wasn't here alone. The question is whether it came through with the exchange group or followed behind them." Zemet turned. "It could have nested. The rift beasts weren't just predators. They seeded themselves into ecosystems, camouflaged, adapted, then collapsed biospheres." Clayman entered, carrying a sensor tablet. "We've isolated the rift field signature left behind. Its echo matches subspace instability. I believe a temporary portal was used, likely unintentional." Maggie raised a brow. "You mean someone opened a door without knowing what would crawl through?" Clayman nodded. "A student must have passed near a dormant node while en route. The rift creature slipped through unnoticed until now." Tyler glanced toward the recovery bay where Matilda lay. She noticed. Before any of us. That evening, 2 more creatures were detected near the primate enclosures, both significantly smaller than the first, but no less dangerous. Maggie, Tyler, and the alien delegation joined zoo security in a coordinated sweep, using bait stations and perimeter alarms. But it was Matilda's path that gave them the edge. Her pheromones had been collected during surgery. Traces from the battle clung to her scales. With a synthesized trail laid out through the zoo's back corridors, the creatures were lured into a controlled area near the maintenance facilities. One was captured, sedated, and placed in containment under armed surveillance. The other didn't make it far. It had emerged during broad daylight and was trampled by a stampeding herd of buffalo, panicked by a misfired tranquilizer. Zoo staff mourned the loss of their best camera equipment, but no injuries were reported. The following morning, Jamais made a formal address to the human contingent. "We extend our gratitude," he said, standing stiffly but with a visible edge of humility, "not only for the containment efforts, but for the defense of one of our own. We underestimated your ecosystem and its inhabitants." "You underestimated a snake," Maggie corrected. Clayman added, "and overestimated our preparedness." Jamais nodded once. "Earth's predators may be grounded, but their awareness transcends expectation." Tyler chuckled. "You might want to include that in your next briefing packet." 2 days passed. Matilda stabilized. Dr. Carson removed the final drain tube from her side, satisfied with the healing response. Anacondas, when cared for correctly, healed slowly but reliably. She still hadn't eaten, but given the trauma, no one pushed her. Tyler visited often. Sometimes he just sat, sometimes he talked. She was never trained for that, he said to Maggie as they watched Matilda rest under infrared lamps. She's been behind glass for years, and she still knew what that thing was. Maggie sipped from her thermos. "That's what keeps getting me. She didn't just react to a threat, she predicted one. We didn't even know it existed." The Rift Beast carcass had been collected by the alien delegation's specialists, who promised a full genetic and dimensional analysis. Tyler didn't care much for the science right now. He just wanted to make sure the snake survived. Sale woke later that evening. He was weak, his skin mottled and pale, but lucid. His first words were halting and confused. "The serpent shielded me?" Tyler sat beside him. "Yeah, she did." Way beneath the... Tyler exhaled. "I've been asking myself that all week." Jamais entered behind him. "She didn't perceive you as prey, she perceived you as family." Sael blinked slowly. "That is not a designation her species should even comprehend." "Maybe," Tyler said, "but she saw something none of us could." That night, under calm skies and dimmed enclosures, Matilda shifted for the first time in hours. She raised her head toward the window, tongue flickering. The room was quiet, the zoo was still. And far beyond, in the dim stretch of undeveloped land past the perimeter fence, something watched, briefly, then turned and disappeared into the brush. Tyler stood at the glass, unaware of the eyes that had just left. He leaned forward slightly and whispered, "You're not just muscle, are you?" Matilda didn't respond, but she didn't have to. 3 weeks later, Denver Zoo reopened its reptile exhibit. The media had moved on, mostly. A few blurry videos had surfaced, grainy clips of slithering coils and trembling aliens screaming in chorus, but nothing clear enough to hold the world's attention. Just another wild headline drowned by weirder news from other corners of the galaxy. Inside the newly reinforced enclosure, Matilda lay coiled in a shallow pool beneath warm UV lamps, one eye lazily half-lidded. The scars on her flank had faded into a textured ripple. Her appetite had returned with force 3 healthy feedings in 10 days. Dr. Carson had declared her healing within acceptable limits for her species, considering trauma, muscle stress, and fluid imbalance. A full recovery would still take another few weeks, but she was past the danger. Tyler leaned on the railing, sipping coffee gone lukewarm. "She looks normal." Maggie nodded beside him. "That's the part that's not normal." The zoo had quietly revised Matilda's profile. A new sign stood outside her tank, detailing her rescue efforts in vague terms. Alerted staff to a potential threat, demonstrated defensive behavior toward an injured visitor. They left out the rift beasts. The city's tourism board had politely insisted. "They want to keep it quiet," Maggie said. "I get it, nobody wants to hear an interdimensional apex predator almost took out a zoo full of kids." Tyler shrugged. "Let 'em come back. Matilda's ready." The alien delegation was scheduled to depart in 2 days. Sale had regained full neural function, though he now wore a pulse-dampening collar that tracked his biometrics. a precaution in case of further rift exposure. He spent most of his time in the visitor lounge, drawing swirling patterns on a touchscreen. Clément had explained it as reflective therapy. Jemet had changed too, less smug. He still moved with stiff posture and formal enunciation, but the sarcasm had drained out of him. He now accompanied Tyler on the daily rounds, shadowing his explanations with a quiet diligence that was almost respectful. "You know," Tyler said as they walked toward the aviary, "I thought your group was going to get me fired." "I thought your ecosystem was primitive," Jemet replied. "We were both misinformed." Tyler stopped by a feed chute and grinned. "You learn anything useful?" "Yes," Zermatt said. "Underestimating non-sapient organisms is not a sign of advanced civilization. It is a sign of arrogance." Tyler stared at him, surprised. "That's actually not bad." Jemet's head tilted. "Matilda is not a symbol of Earth's dominance. She is a symbol of its cohesion. Your predators do not kill for status. They protect without transaction. That is statistically rare." Tyler's smile faded into something more contemplative. "She didn't have to, but she did." "Precisely." Later that afternoon, as twilight turned the sky orange, the alien delegation held a private farewell event in the zoo's amphitheater. Zoo staff were invited. So were several local officials, who were carefully ushered past the less sensitive enclosures. Tyler took his place in the third row, arms crossed, as Zermatt stepped onto the small stage. The student wore a tailored vest in traditional colors, his throat band glittering with a light that matched the setting sun. "We leave Earth with revised understanding," he began, "not of its physics or culture or language, but of its relationships." He gestured to a display screen behind him. It showed a photograph Matilda, curled beside Sale's medical cot, the alien asleep and peaceful under soft blue light. She did not know him. She did not need to. She acted with clarity that our own biosensors failed to match. Her instincts were not about survival. They were about defense. "We call this an anomaly." Jemet looked across the crowd. "But Earth calls it nature." There was silence. Then soft, respectful applause, some hesitant, some surprised, all genuine. Tyler stood up afterward, heading backstage with a container of thawed rabbit meat for Matilda's evening feeding. He found Maggie already there, placing fresh moss and checking heat levels. "Speech wasn't bad," she said. "He's changed," Tyler replied. "Or we changed him." They moved in sync, adjusting thermal lamps and water quality sensors. Matilda lifted her head at the sound of the gate, tongue flicking, then settled again once she caught Tyler's scent. "She's calmer now," Maggie said. "Maybe she knows it's over." "Is it?" Tyler hesitated. "There haven't been any more rift field spikes. The zoo's clean. Satellite sensors haven't picked up anything irregular within a 1,000-mile radius. I think whatever came through with that portal didn't survive. We're not a suitable environment." Maggie didn't respond right away. She crouched by the glass, watching Matilda breathe. "She could have just escaped and hidden," she said. "Gone to ground like any other snake, but she didn't." "No," Tyler said. "She stayed." He sat down on the bench near the rear wall, hands on his knees. "Maybe animals don't need explanations the way we do. Maybe she didn't think about it like we would." Maggie stood. "Maybe that's what makes it impressive." The next morning, the aliens left. The shuttle hummed low, then lifted into the sky with a ripple of distorted light. Jemet gave Tyler a small nod through the window, before disappearing into the clouds. By the end of the week, zoo attendance spiked again. A quiet word had spread through forums and message boards, rumors of something strange, something extraordinary. Most didn't believe it. Some insisted it was a PR stunt. But every day, the bench by Matilda's enclosure filled with people who just wanted to sit, watch, think. Tyler watched them too, from behind the scenes. Sometimes he told the story. Sometimes he just watched the snake. She didn't need applause. She'd done what she needed to do. And now she rested.